Startup exits suck, but nobody's talking about it. The whole idea of tech startups, the reason why we can get away with raising millions of dollars for like 0.5% of equity, is because everyone expects that one day the company will either go public or be acquired. But selling a company is a years-long, painful process, and nobody warns you about it. Nobody warned me about it.
It was dreadful.
How long did it take?
12 months and some.
I spoke to dozens of founders about it. Many didn't dare to go on record because the NDAs they had to sign would take away all of their money, basically.
So I'm under a really tight NDA that lasts until my grandchildren have grandchildren.
But two of them agreed to share their stories. Devrim, who is or was the CEO of SuperPeer, acquired by Skillshare in March 2024, and Adrisio, who raised money from Y Combinator and SoftBank and eventually sold his company Arcus to MasterCard in 2021. So let me start with some context about the companies, what they did, and how the acquisition conversations started. Did you get a call? Did you get an email? It's like, hey, we want to buy you? Is that how it goes?
Well, when we started SuperPeer in 2020, the entire company signed up. That was all the way back then that we knew that they were looking at us. In 2023, by checking how much more work do we need to do to actually get to a point where we can justify our valuations.
For context, Devrim was a second-time founder, and he raised his first pre-seed round of $2 million in early 2020, and the company raised a seed round of $8 million in November of that same year, in the middle of the whole COVID funding craziness.
I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I raised money before. I've never seen those valuations. I've never seen people just piling up to give you money and trying to squeeze each other out of the deal. Like one investor comes and says, I will do the, triple the valuation, more money and things like that.
In 2020, we were raising our Series B. I was out in the Valley and raising our Series B, and then the pandemic happened. So my wife and I escaped San Francisco and went to the Dominican Republic and started doing a Series B from my wife's mother's house. MasterCard, we also have some kind of relationship with them as well, but nothing formal. When they approached us initially, it was as an investment. That's part of our B, but that conversation quickly grew to acquisition. And we actually said no, maybe 4 times.
From a founder that has not sold any startups ever, feels like selling it is kind of like the end game. Why would you say no to these 4 first offers?
I think the first factor is where you are and where you think you can be, right? So startups hit some pivotal points in their trajectory, and I think we thought that we were about to hit one. So we thought we had like a massive opportunity in our hands. I was going through a lot of turmoil internally at the company. We had parted ways with one of my co-founders, and I was temporarily fired, right? So there was just a lot of friction internally, right? And I always tell founders, your co-founder relationship is your home. Like when that's broken, it's really hard to do anything else well, because that's where you go for solace and some degree of calm.
This is maybe a good moment to talk about the different type of startup exits. Every deal is different, but we can probably group them into these buckets. You'll read about all kinds of exits in the news, but they'll never say what kind of acquisition it was. But here's a guide I made for you to catch some of the clues. Acqui-hires will never ever reveal the price that was paid for the buy. So that's the first clue. The other clue is that the product is usually shut down immediately or only months after the buy. Normally, the acqui-hired company was struggling, running out of money, maybe they didn't get enough traction to raise the next round, or their product wasn't growing much. You can usually tell because their team was shrinking. Now, acqui-hired companies are usually running out of money, which means they're not profitable, and this usually happens for small startups, say under 30 employees, and the reason why they're called acqui-hires is because what the buyer is really doing is just recruiting a fully formed, trained, and proven tested team. Now, I know a couple companies that were acquired by Google, and each team member had to go through Google's usual interview process for new employees. Some got in, some didn't. Needless to say, nobody makes a lot of money in an acquisition.
Typically, the sellers don't make too much money in these acqui-hire situations. And the reason is that they are not great exits. They are essentially a graceful way for the startup team to transition back into the corporate world, secure a high-paying job without the stain of a failed startup.
Now, this is Attila Hardy. He helps startups with their M&A. He might help us sell Slidebean one day, and he certainly knows more about this than I do.
In these acqui-hire situations, the valuation is essentially the perceived value of the team. How much is this team worth to acquire for the buyer? And this can range anywhere from $100K per capita or per team member to $2 million, depending on a lot of factors. So it's very hard to pin down the exact valuation because the beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
The other extreme of the spectrum is the rockstar acquisitions. That's your Instagram, your Slack, your 22 billion WhatsApp sale. We made a video about it. These are all rockstar deals where both companies are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and the merger of these companies just makes a lot of sense. Now, they can spare no expense hiring every expert in the world for this whole acquisition process, and the people involved in these acquisitions most certainly don't watch this channel to find advice, so I'm not gonna spend too much time there. We cover those in our main channel, so you should check that out. But here in the middle is where things get tricky.
So the first bucket is financial buyers. These are typically companies who buy businesses for their future cash flows because they want to create a return to their own investors. They typically don't have a strategic or synergic angle that strategic buyers have.
Now, these financial buyers are looking to monetize the company for profits. They're maybe consolidating the tech support or the marketing with other companies in their portfolio so that they can maximize those profit margins. So there's no strategic value for them in the company. It's just really about the profits and how much of that they can collect as profits and dividends.
These buyers value companies based on their future cash flows, and they typically apply a profitability multiple, EBITDA being the most common one, and the multiple can be anywhere from 3 times EBITDA to 10 times EBITDA, depending on a bunch of different factors.
Now, comparing the dollar, like the exit value for one of these acquisitions versus a rockstar exit sucks. That's not what we signed up for. But think about it. Investors essentially are paying you for those profits in advance. If the company isn't growing, how else are they gonna make money from it? So they have little regard for the team or the technology or the brand. It is very much a monetary transaction.
Now, the other type of acquisitions are strategic acquisitions, which are similar to the rockstar acquisitions, just smaller in scale. When a strategic deal happens, it happens because the buyer sees some extra value in what you've built that is not apparent to a financial buyer. Maybe that's the niche that you're in that they want to enter into. Maybe that's the customers you have that they want to start cross-selling their own products to. Maybe it's the technology that you've built that will shorten their own path of getting to a desired outcome.
Now, strategic acquisitions feel closer to what I was sold on when I became a founder. I very much started Slidebean with the intention of selling the company, but a buyer for us would need to be someone who values not just our tech, but the product and also the brand we've created. Now, both SuperPeer and Arcus were strategic acquisitions, but not rockstar enough to polish their acquisition price, so they land somewhere in the middle of this chart.
That is match made in heaven. Our aspiration starting SuperPeer was to write another Instagram, Twitch, Patreon type of story, not to stay afloat or just to make enough money to pay the bills. So at the end of 2023, when we realized how hard it is to get to the creators and how hard it is to retain them, we were like, this is gonna take a long time. We raised $10 million, so the first round was $2 million. And if we only had raised one round, seeing that one-on-one calls weren't going to move the needle as much as we hoped, probably would have been the end of that story. So we could have kept going, but it made so much more sense to do it like that. I think that's super beautiful.
If we do this, it's life-changing for a lot of us, not just the founders. You have a culmination of 7 years of pain with a few months of really intense pain.
Walk me through the decision to kind of email MasterCard back and say, hey, like, yeah, we want to consider a buy. What happens next?
Typically what happens when you say, okay, we want to consider it, is that you do a presentation to the corp dev team, so that you have a couple conversations with the person that's sponsoring the deal, the head of line of business. And then what happens is after that is they go silent for a couple of weeks and they do the homework. And after a couple of weeks, it's either yay or nay.
This is the part of the story that you usually hear about, the beginning and the other side. But by every account I heard, remember, a bunch of them couldn't go on record this is a pretty horrible process.
If you're running out of money, I mean, if this will bankrupt you, I think the legal costs are just off the roof. It's over 6 figures.
Like, you think VCs, like this is that times 10. I mean, you're getting like thousands, and I'm not exaggerating, thousands of questions.
More questions they ask, more they get paid.
The degree of diligence is so overwhelming that if you're not really well prepared, it can kind of stifle your operations because you're running a company. We did a really good job at this, and we wound up kind of like breaking the team down, and we would do like our day job for the day, and at night, like late at night, like 8-9 p.m. at night, we would meet every night and go over the list, and this is what you have, and we did a stand-up daily.
Then there are investors. You're trying to make the deal that works for everyone. The worst part is to collect documents if you're missing something from an ex-employee. They usually are not. You are not on the top of their minds. I mean, we always had good relationships with our ex-employees because literally, like, you just get stupid questions. In a way, you cannot say these are stupid questions. They are stupid questions, but you have to answer them. M&A is designed for both lawyers to make sure that everything is happening exactly legally.
After the companies get introduced and they agree that they're considering a buy, a due diligence process begins. Now, this is the nightmare that Devrim and Idrisu are describing. In most cases, a term sheet or a letter of intent is signed before the process begins, which typically includes NDAs and exclusivity clauses so that you can't go around them and negotiate another deal with someone else.
How long did it take?
12 months and some. It feels like your life is on pause. At the same time, both parties can exit the deal. That friggin' sucks. That's also, some, like, on the back of your head, you're thinking they can walk out of this. Like, if something happens on their next board meeting, someone says something, or another economic downturn, like, anything can happen, and then the buyer leaves the table. You had already said no to other buyers, and your team is already like a little bit like on the edge. And you have to manage all this stuff also for yourself. You're like, oh no, I can't start this new thing. I can't talk about it. I can't say anything. You can't even talk about the deal.
In case of Idrisu, since MasterCard is like a financial institution, not so much like a tech startup, things worked a little different.
The word intent is you need to make sure you understand that word. It is just an intent. It is not a fact. So it doesn't mean that much. It means you're exclusive. It means you're working towards something. It doesn't mean that much. And literally the day was about to expire. It was January 6th, 2021. And we were having the call with like a bunch of lawyers. And then it's like, oh yeah, the White House being raided.
Now, from what Idrisu could tell me, their letter of intent gave them 60 to 90 days to do incredibly intensive due diligence.
The standard deal where, you sign and you close. That's when you sign the merger docs and you close them. Close them means you fund the transaction. And there's bifurcated deals. And the bifurcated deals are typically different because signing happens and there's a degree of kind of conditions or things that need to happen. And we fell into this, another bucket. That's when the process really started. Because, once you're done with LOI, and then it's like green light, then you go into merger docs, which is a lot of documentation.
In your minds, how long from letter of intent to sale? How long did you guys expect that was going to take? And how much did it actually take?
So long had happened that my wife and I got pregnant again, and we were waiting on particular documentation to be approved. And for us, it was Thanksgiving week, which is really tough because in the States, nothing happens that week. Everybody has to be on this call, and you do a closing call, you do a checklist call, and you go through all the checklist items. And that's when everybody says, like, do you agree? Yes. Do you agree? Yes. And then afterwards, they ask me if I agree. I'm like, yes. And afterwards, I didn't even think it was going to happen. I was like, nah, it's just not going to. And then the next day is when you typically announce, and for us, is we announce something on NASDAQ or Bloomberg, something like that. That's when I knew it was real. Like, okay, now it's real. You can't take it back. You can't take it back now. So
the M&A process is often designed to put companies in a position where the buyer has so much power over the other company, so much money has been spent in the transaction, so much time has been put in, that there's no way out but completing the sale. One of the founders I chatted with said that in the last few stages of the deal, the buyer told them that they had to drop the offering price for the exit significantly, very different from what they agreed in the letter of intent. But at that time, the company was in a position where they just couldn't back out anymore.
How was team morale through this?
Your team starts to feel like, should I look for another job? Should I commit 100% here, or should I be like, one leg out? It was dreadful. Not Skillshare's fault, of course. It's just the M&A is designed for both lawyers to make sure that everything is happening exactly legally.
Now, the biggest question for me was about the team, because how do you handle this with your team? How do people come to work every day?
When letter of intent came, we were about 35, somewhere above 30 and 35. So we had that letter of intent. And then you remember the market conditions in 2023. So we had to do a huge layoff in June. And then we were left with our core team. Letting go of anyone is really the worst part of this, I think. I felt, this is a speculation, I don't know exactly, that the first time I felt Fatih and I lost some of the trust. I felt that engineers, designers, everybody else, they felt, oh shit, am I gonna be here? Am I gonna be transferred over? And if so, there are like so many questions as an employee.
Now, Idrisio's sale was very different because of the size of the company. So they couldn't tell anyone.
At that size, like 100 plus employees, you gotta do it in secret.
How big was the circle of trust of people that knew?
At that particular level, like most of your interaction, if not all, it's with your C-suite. We had a C-suite of about 7 or 8 employees, talking like CTO, COO, CRO, head of product, head of HR, head of finance. Kind of have a mutual agreement of trust there. Obviously, if you brought into the fall, like all those people have to come out like very well off, or it needs to be clear what the outcome is for them. It cannot be kind of left up in the air. We wanted them to have like skin in the game in the whole process. Like you're gonna do this and you're gonna stay home, like working till like 11 o'clock every day. But guess what? Afterwards, this is gonna be life changing for you. It was very painful, very painful. I'm still recovering from it.
How did you celebrate, man? The day the ink dry on the contract.
It wasn't anymore like, oh my god moment. It was more like, phew, like finally that we have signed.
I'm genuinely curious and jealous. How is this life post selling your startup?
It was first surreal because I didn't join the company. They took our technical part and then technical team because they already have their business team and sales team and marketing team, so they did not need that. It was hard to believe that I would wake up and not check devram@superpure.com. So it was a little interesting. Not check bank accounts, not do the payroll. They took over, of course, our social media accounts. I did not have access to them anymore. That was a bit like you just don't know. It's almost like someone moved you from your home to somewhere else, but this somewhere else feels good.
It took me a while to like digest it and have a sense of gratitude towards it. I'm still, because I was so focused on the pain that I didn't get to see, I didn't get to experience the joy. And I'm getting there now. I spent a lot of time coaching founders. I started a nonprofit called the Founder School precisely to help founders incubate companies. So very much at the pre-idea phase. And a lot of it, and I tell my wife all the time, that's mostly therapy for me because I made so many mistakes.
He's shy about it, but Idrisio also wrote this incredible book, which he signed for me when we met a few months ago. I can't recommend it enough. It's called Underdog Founder. I'll link it in the description. Devram, on the other hand, is working on building some robots.
All I wanted to do was to make a robot that picks up toys after my boy, 2-year-old. And that just ended up being a large project, and I love it. I don't feel like I am jobless or purposeless. If that was the case, I think I would not be happy. I would find something to do.
That's it for today. Let me know if you want me to publish the full interview recordings if you find that useful, and we'll catch you in the next one.